There's a saying that all fires are the same, which is true, that is, until you put one in a building. Once you add geometry to the equation, the variances increase exponentially. We must understand the materials and hazards inherent to the construction in order to develop strategic foreseeability on the fireground. Those who've undervalued this notion have failed to recognize that it's the one variable of the equation over which we have no control, while simultaneously having pre-existing information. In other words, we can do nothing about building problems, only problems inside a building. And one of those two things was present long before we arrived. The solution is a choice, and it's a simple one. Immerse yourself in your environment, your buildings, your arena. Not doing so is akin to producing a sailor unfamiliar with the sea or a teacher unfamiliar with the classroom. Neither will be successful, not for lack of skill, but for lack of awareness in their surroundings. Early on, we teach recruits that there are 3 priorities on every fireground: life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Doing so in this manner without a deeper context can lead to a mindset that these buildings aren't worth taking a risk for. But we must understand that these buildings are a higher priority with their historical and socioeconomic value. No property is worth injuring firefighters over, but the buildings on your main street must be placed higher on the list for property conservation than most. These buildings aren't just revenue-producing businesses. They can also be tax-paying homes on the upper floors, and most importantly, a town's identity. When small-town USA loses its main street, there is no more town. There's no more focal point of social events, the business owners leave, the post office closes, and the festivals move to the fairgrounds outside of town. The fact of the matter is, dog parks and community gardens don't attract people like a row of 20th century brick and mortar. A fire on Main Street requires showing up with a plan that saves instead of one that settles. To make informed decisions on arrival, we must have prior knowledge combined with an expert level of familiarity on legacy construction. This is only possible with the perpetual study of the environment in which you work. Just because you've been in a building dozens of times for EMS runs or automatic alarms doesn't mean you actually know the building, just its layout. That would be akin to saying you know the entire forest just by being familiar with one trail inside its boundaries. Don't fall for lazy perception that leads to complacency based on false confidence. Often we find ourselves seeing the building but not understanding what we're looking at. We need to develop the skill of looking at buildings with a sort of X-ray vision. We need to know what lies behind a wall and beneath a roof. To predict how the building will react to fire, we need to understand how these components transfer loads so that we can effectively triage our environment. From the street, some are obvious, others not so much, and some impossible without pre-existing knowledge of what's behind the door. Now add smoke, fire, and a possible life hazard, you've created a massive challenge. The goal is simple: become the firefighter with the strategic foreseeability to avoid being lost on the fireground. It's best to have a holistic set of skills so you can connect your environment with your conditions. Due to the nature of building construction, this course is aimed at all levels. The fact is, we all see buildings, but few truly understand what they're looking at. That's a problem for 2 important reasons. A building is the one thing that directly or indirectly affects everything we do on the fireground. And the only thing we can do about a compromised building is to avoid it entirely. We can mitigate smoke, fire, and rescue trapped victims, but we can do nothing about the leaning wall. You can know all there is to know about your fire behavior, your tools and strategies, but none of which hold any value if you're unfamiliar with the space in which they are relied upon. This is why knowing your buildings on a visceral level is paramount. If you want to be able to forward think, you must understand the data you are receiving. The goal of this course is to help younger members understand the importance of intimately knowing your buildings, as well as to provide solutions to re-engage more experienced members. We hope that this information will provide a foundation of knowledge that will aid you in making informed decisions based on feedback from both ends of the equation. Regardless of department size or response, buildings require an intimate knowledge of their construction to have success upon arrival.